Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. Null is an evil god who was imprisoned a long time ago by his own creations, a parasitic lifeform called symbiote. Now, the key to his freedom has finally been created. To find it, he recruits a group of creatures called xenohosts that, besides being monstrous, are able to open interdimensional portals at any moment. In Mexico, journalist Eddie Brock chats with the waiter about the dimension they are in, trying to understand the superhero trend. Eddie carries the famous symbiote named Venom, and the two talk as if they were two separate people. When a portal suddenly opens and sucks Eddie back into his original reality, Venom becomes so happy that he starts preparing a drink, against his host's wishes. On TV, the reporter shows a picture of Eddie and says that the former journalist is being sought for bizarre crimes that occurred at San Francisco Cathedral. Venom concludes that they are fugitives now and cannot return there anytime soon. But Eddie does not accept the life of an outlaw being innocent. Looking at a miniature of the Statue of Liberty, he remembers someone who can clear his name, even if it requires a bit of blackmail. Excited about the trip to New York, Venom promises to devour any wrongdoer who crosses his path. Exiting the bar, the street is deserted and silent, except for the strange sound of distant growls. As the noise increases, Eddie asks if Venom is also hearing it. The symbiote confirms, encouraging Eddie to investigate. He says someone seems to be in trouble and, furthermore, confesses that he is hungry. Descending a dimly lit staircase, Eddie follows the sound to a locked door. Still motivating the host for a possible fight, Venom reminds him of his duties as the lethal protector. The lock gives way with the first blow, revealing a spacious room where several dogs are trapped in stacked cages. Venom becomes enraged when Eddie explains that they are fighting dogs. The gang that exploits them is already approaching, quite displeased with the presence of the intruder. In a threatening tone, the leader says that this territory is his. Eddie responds to this by talking about his more aggressive side and warns that this will not end well. The criminals draw their weapons all at once, ready for the confrontation. The leader laughs at the weaker man's audacity and begins to slash his face with a knife. At this point, Venom can no longer contain himself and asks when he can take control. Seeing no other way to deal with these criminals, Eddie says it's right now. His left foot transforms and kicks the gang leader hard, sending him flying. When the criminals start shooting, the metamorphosis is almost complete. They freeze in fear at the terrifying figure of Venom. His arms stretch to reach the enemies before they can run. While delivering powerful blows, he also opens all the cages, and each freed dog joins the fight. At the end of the battle, what remains of the gang is suspended by tentacles, and the duo synchronously introduces themselves, with part of Eddie's face appearing. Then Venom moves on to what matters and devours the four heads, one by one. Eddie continues on his way, unaware that he is being watched by the grotesque xenohost in Null's service. Besides the creature, there is a second group watching Eddie through security cameras. The poor waiter has barely recovered from the scare when General Rex Strickland appears, filled with questions. Then we meet Dr. Payne, who still struggles with the trauma of losing her twin brother, struck by lightning as a teenager. She wakes up to a message from Strickland, warning that Patrick Mulligan is on his way. Mulligan is the police officer who appeared in the news as one of Eddie's victims, but now we see he is still alive and under medical care. On the radio, it is announced that Area 51 is being deactivated by the US government and will be permanently closed in 3 days. But when Payne arrives there, we see that the true facilities remain active underground. Area 55 is where Project Imperium is developed, strictly focused on the study of symbiotes. Strickland receives Payne in the lab and informs her that Mulligan was abandoned by his original symbiote, named Toxin. Now the scientists have just introduced a new symbiote, and it seems that the connection is going well. Sadie is also part of the team, and she is the one who receives the sample collected from the Mexican bar, with traces of venom. Then Payne prepares to interview Mulligan, criticizing Strickland for his lack of care with protocols. Despite their differences, both are eager for the unique opportunity to talk to a symbiote, as this is the first time they have obtained a compatible pairing. With Mulligan's voice, the symbiote answers questions from Payne and Strickland directly. They want to know why so many of them are arriving on Earth lately, and they discover that the species is fleeing from a very powerful enemy capable of tracking them anywhere in the universe. Meanwhile, Venom decides to reach New York by plane, but not necessarily inside it. The other passengers might not have noticed the unusual hitchhiker if it weren't for the Xenohost. Much less subtle, the creature jumps from the ground to the aircraft, violently shaking everyone aboard. After a brief struggle, the monster is sucked into one of the engines, and Eddie is shocked when his symbiote decides to retreat, as that means leaving him in free fall. Just before impact, Venom turns into a parachute and prevents his host from splattering. The pieces of the Xenohost end up raining down on a van belonging to a man named Martin Moon, who is on his way to Area 51 with his whole family, having spent their savings to embark on the adventure. As the creature reconstructs itself effortlessly, Eddie and Venom land in a deserted area and begin to fight. Venom tells the story of Null and reveals that he is confined to the planet Clintar. The only thing that can free him is the Codex, a life force that is only generated when a symbiote resurrects its host. This is exactly what happened with Eddie and Venom some time ago, and that is why Null is sending these creatures to capture them. The only good news is that the Xenohost cannot track the Codex while the host is in control. Venom can show his head and arms, but he will no longer be able to assume his true form completely, as this will attract his enemies. Still processing all this, Eddie also remembers that he is now a fugitive and cannot waste time. Venom then takes over a horse and makes it incredibly fast, to Eddie's despair. In Area 55, Strickland doubts that the symbiotes are seeking refuge. Observing the captured specimens after a meteor crash, he says this could just be an excuse for a coordinated invasion. Shortly thereafter, he is informed about the plane incident and immediately organizes an ambush. Caught off guard resting in a creek, Eddie almost drowns during the attack. Venom quickly abandons the horse and tries to swim to him, while the agents dive right behind. The symbiote ends up trapped in a net while Eddie struggles with one agent and manages to eliminate her with her own weapon. Venom frees himself from the net and begins to assimilate various animals until he sees that Eddie is being dragged by the current, about to fall over a waterfall. With no choice, he momentarily assumes his real form to save him, which immediately alerts the Xenohost. To Strickland's team, the arrival of the enormous monster is completely unexpected, and they end up focusing on a counterattack. Eddie and Venom take the opportunity to escape while the creature devours 3 soldiers. Strickland loses patience with Pain when she asks him to collect samples, furious with her priorities. Trying to gather more information, she returns to talk to Mulligan, and this time the symbiote appears in a complete transformation. It explains what the Codex is and says that Null will devastate the entire universe as soon as he manages to get it. Eddie and Venom are the only duo carrying the Codex, which can only be destroyed with the death of one of the two. Strickland sees this as a new mission, in which Venom is the main target. Pain starts to protest, but even Sadie is shocked enough to agree with the soldier. Meanwhile, the Moon family is having a barbecue, and the aroma attracts Venom. Martin warmly welcomes Eddie and introduces his wife named Nova. When he says that the children's names are Echo and Leaf, Eddie needs to disguise Venom's reaction, who disapproves of the creative names. But when Martin warns that the barbecue is vegan, Eddie can't stop Venom from throwing the plate away. Luckily for him, the family isn't too startled by weird people. Nova explains that they are fans of ETs and are on their way to Area 51, and Martin offers a ride to Las Vegas. Inside the van, it is very hot, and on top of that, the family is out of tune. During the pause in the nap, Leaf confesses to Eddie that he is afraid of aliens and is hoping not to see any. Despite having one of them inside him, Eddie reassures the boy and says that those things don't exist. Arriving in Las Vegas, Eddie does not realize that the cameras are already alerting Area 55 about his whereabouts. Before saying goodbye, Martin gives him some change and a pair of hideous shoes. Excited about the bustle of the city, Venom starts planning the outings they will make when they arrive in New York. Eddie promises to take him to a Broadway musical when he can, but at the moment, his finances amount to $20. Thinking about trying his luck at gambling, Eddie can't even enter the casino dressed like that, and the doorman suffers a headbutt from Venom for his arrogance. His next victim is a swanky man who has drunk too much, giving Eddie a quick wardrobe change. He enters the casino without any problems this time, while the other doorman is still recovering. Contrary to his host and controlling his movements, Venom bets the $20 all at once and becomes furious when he loses it all. But their luck starts to change when they meet Mrs. Chen, a great friend of both who invites them to party in her luxurious suite. Meanwhile, Strickland receives the information that Eddie is at the Paris hotel. He orders his capture and makes a call to request complete control over Project Imperium. In Mrs. Chen's suite, she asks to dance with Venom and ignores Eddie's pleas for her to give up the idea. The symbiote gets so excited by the invitation that he forgets the restrictions and takes on his true form. Not far away, the Xenohost feels the presence of the Codex at that very moment. As the creature crosses the desert at full speed, Venom reveals his skill on the dance floor. Through the glass dome, Venom only sees the danger arriving moments before the invasion. The Xenohost bursts through the roof and fills almost the entire room with its colossal size. Returning to hide inside the host, Venom tells Eddie to keep calm and stay very quiet. Confused by the sudden disappearance of the Codex, the monster decides to search elsewhere and leaves the same way it entered. Unfortunately, this is no relief, as the aircraft from Project Imperium already flies over the hotel, and the room quickly fills with soldiers in seconds. They capture Eddie and Venom, forcibly separating the two. Before losing consciousness, Eddie laments leaving behind the first decent shoe he had managed to get. Mrs. Chen tries to defend her friends, but doesn't dare to defy the armed agents. Then, Eddie and Venom are taken to the underground laboratory. The Xenohost reaches the surface almost at the same time the Moon family parks at the gate of Area 51. Echo makes an effort to seem impressed, and Leaf finds a hole in the fence. Excited about the last opportunity to discover intergalactic secrets, Martin encourages everyone to pass through and snoop on the facilities up close. In the underground, Payne says that Venom seems to be deteriorating since being separated from the host. With a sigh of pity, she asks Sadie to take him to be with the other specimens. Still touring what remains of Area 51, Martin sees one of the towers that has not yet been dismantled. In yet another of his terrible ideas, he says the view must be more interesting from the top and starts climbing the tower, with the whole family behind him. Reaching the top, they are disappointed to see that everything really looks empty and abandoned. Eddie wakes up still dazed and is surprised when Venom does not respond. Only then does he remember everything that happened and realizes he is in some kind of special cell. Even more unexpected is the fact that Mulligan, whom Eddie didn't even know was alive, is his neighbor. Once again, he does not speak for himself but rather gives voice to the symbiote, which soon takes its real form to talk to Eddie. He says the lab is full of other symbiotes, ready to defend the planet against Null. All Eddie needs to do is free them. Then Dr. Payne arrives with Sadie, and Eddie asks her where his friend is. Doing her best to keep the conversation cordial, Payne assures that Venom is being well taken care of. But her peace efforts go down the drain shortly afterward when Strickland arrives shouting orders. He informs the scientist that her services are no longer needed on Project Imperium and announces that he is the one in charge now. Seeing the door to Eddie's cell opening, Payne asks what Strickland intends to do, and he replies that he will destroy the Codex. He shoots Eddie right there, and Venom appears at that very moment, using Sadie as support to save his friend. He returns to Eddie already in his most frightening form and ready to face the soldiers when the Xenohost breaks through the wall right behind him. While Strickland orders his men to shoot, Venom advises them to run, and the soldiers quickly regret obeying the general. Suddenly, Mulligan's symbiote bursts from its cell and grabs the monster's snout, telling Venom to save himself. Both Mulligan and his symbiote are immediately devoured by the creature. Now, panic has spread throughout the lab, and everyone is trying to save themselves. Venom can barely leave the hallway, and the Xenohost lands right on top of him, indifferent to the soldiers' bullets. Venom then asks someone to free the other symbiotes, and Sadie decides to take the risk, pressing the button that releases them. Venom alternates between his form and Eddie's to confuse the Xenohost, but this does not hold the monster back for long. Sadie screams when the creature's claw pierces a staff member named Jim. Then she sees that he was saved by one of the newly released symbiotes. The two connect, and the symbiote takes on its own form to fight the Xenohost. The same happens with other people, and several duos begin to form, allowing the symbiotes to use their full potential. Even so, the fight is still not balanced, and the Xenohost continues to devour one opponent after another. Outraged by the situation, Sadie also connects to a symbiote and charges into battle in style. She also tells Eddie to get out of there quickly and take the Codex away from the creature. In the tower outside, Martin tells his children that the long-awaited encounter with aliens is not happening this time. As soon as he finishes speaking, a wall is demolished by a cluster of fleeing aliens. The fight continues chaotically inside the lab, and Dr. Payne also decides to run, but not before slipping a sample into her pocket. Nova tries to calm the children while several soldiers and scientists begin to exit through the same hole, all screaming and running. It doesn't take long for them to understand what people are fleeing from, as the Xenohost also comes through the opening. Martin begins to shout that there is an alien attack, as if he were the first to notice the fact. Still trying to get the Codex away from there, Eddie runs away from the fight, and Leaf recognizes him from the top of the tower. The whole family starts calling his name, and Eddie panics at seeing them in danger. Ejecting a tentacle from Venom, he rises to the top of the tower, astonishing his new friends completely. Leaf begins to cry in fear and asks if Eddie can help his family. Confessing that he lied about the existence of aliens, Eddie explains that one of them is his best friend and says he will get everyone out safely. Then Venom shows his head to talk to the boy and wins the family's sympathy. Still determined to resolve all this his way, Strickland marches toward the Xenohost with an explosive weapon. Sadie tries to stop him when she sees the various symbiotes hanging from the creature, but the general does not listen to her. The explosion causes many innocent victims and doubles the damage, as each contained a host and a symbiote. The impact also shakes the tower, and it begins to crumble. Seeing the family plummeting from the heights, two symbiotes stretch to help Venom save them. Everyone ends up reaching the ground unscathed, though very scared. Next to Jim's body, Sadie's symbiote is outraged by Strickland's coldness. Crying, she says that the symbiotes are not the villains in this story. To make matters worse, Strickland's cruelty has not even managed to stop the real villain. Before the general's shocked gaze, the monster regenerates effortlessly. As soon as he fully recovers, Dr. Payne runs him over, offering a ride to the civilians. Eddie barely has time to get the kids into the vehicle, and the Xenohost is already on its feet. He begins to emit a kind of wave that seems to affect all the symbiotes. The vibration reaches Clintar, communicating to Null that the Codex has been found. Eager for the key, he sends another Xenohost to Area 51. Everyone is filled with dread at the sight of the second creature crossing the portal. Sadie is the only one who immediately attacks, quickly followed by the soldiers and other symbiotes. However, it becomes increasingly evident that the battle is already lost. Deciding to take control of the situation, Eddie rides a motorcycle, and Venom takes his form, attracting both monsters to himself. Understanding the trap, Strickland coordinates the support operation. While Payne takes the Moon family back to the van, the Xenohosts continue the pursuit until Venom jumps over a pile of explosives. As the creatures climb the pile, helicopters open fire, causing a huge explosion. The area fills with smoke, and the pilot deduces that the target has been eliminated, but communicates victory too soon. Intact, one of the Xenohosts jumps at him and bites his legs, bringing the helicopter down on a vehicle full of soldiers. Strickland is hit while trying to save the pilot, and then Eddie has an idea. With Sadie's help, he uses the helicopter's blades to slice the creature into several pieces. Sadie grabs the general and the pilot, taking both to Payne. On the other side, the second Xenohost throws Eddie off the motorcycle and lifts him right up to its immense mouth filled with hundreds of teeth. At that moment, a projectile shatters the monster's head, and Eddie is surprised to see Martin holding the weapon. But every time one of the Xenohosts is shattered, the other has had time to reconstruct itself. When Sadie charges at one of them, the monster separates the duo and swallows her symbiote. Back in her weaker form, she joins Payne and Strickland. The three can hardly believe it when new portals appear, spitting out several other Xenohosts. Seeing that Eddie is hurt, Venom drags him into the helicopter and says they won't make it out of this. Eddie gets emotional and agrees with the symbiote. After healing him, Venom takes on his own form and begins to assimilate all the Xenohosts. He indicates to Strickland what he wants to do, and the general tells his colleagues to run far away. Venom ejects Eddie outside, asking his friend to never forget him. Then, he drags his collection of monsters beneath the acid showers as Strickland releases the jets. The process is interrupted when the general loses strength for a moment, but Venom helps him, and the melting continues. Stretching a tentacle toward Eddie, He covers him with a door to protect him before the general finishes the horrific spectacle with a grenade. However, the two scientists are still too close to the explosion, and Sadie trips midway. Breaking the vial she brought in her pocket, Payne connects to a symbiote to save her friend and manages to escape the flames in time. Feeling that the codex is disintegrating, Null begins to scream in rage. Days later, Eddie wakes up in the hospital and for a moment thinks it was all a bad dream. He is devastated to realize that Venom is really gone. Beside him is a high-ranking military officer. He says that Eddie is no longer a fugitive, as his recent heroic acts earned him full amnesty. Before leaving, the officer makes it clear that the agreement is valid only as long as he keeps his mouth shut about all this mess. After that, Eddie finally heads to New York, but now he feels extremely lonely.